the weight of every judgmental stare. His 18-month-old daughter Lily writhed in his arms, her tiny face red and streaked with tears. Nothing worked. The bottle she'd refused. The pacifier she'd spit out. The gentle rocking that once soothed her to sleep now seemed to make everything worse. "Sir, perhaps you could keep her quieter," the flight attendant whispered, her smile strained with barely concealed irritation. "Other passengers are complaining." Dalton's jaw tightened. "I'm trying everything I know." His voice cracked with exhaustion and desperation. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, not since his mother-in-law had suddenly fallen ill and could no longer help with Lily's care. Running a billion-dollar company while raising a toddler alone was proving impossible. A man in row 2 leaned forward. "Some parents just don't know how to handle kids," he muttered loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Maybe hire a professional next time." The words stung because they carried truth. Since Anna's death 2 years ago, Dalton felt like he was drowning. Every day brought new proof that he was failing his daughter. The nannies never lasted long. Lily would cry for hours whenever he left for work. And now, on this flight to his sister's wedding, he was subjecting an entire plane to his parental inadequacy. From her seat in row 23, Kenya Parker watched the scene unfold with growing concern. The beautiful young African-American woman had been on dozens of flights, but she'd never heard a baby cry with such intensity for so long. Her trained eye recognized something the father was missing. The way the baby arched her back. The specific pitch of her cries. The way she pushed away from her father's chest. Kenya had spent 5 years studying early childhood development and another 3 working with difficult cases. She specialized in children who seemed impossible to soothe. But she also knew her place. The man was clearly wealthy, sitting in first class while she occupied a middle seat in economy. The flight attendant had already made it clear that passengers should stay in their designated areas. Still, her heart ached for both father and child. The man's desperation was visible in every line of his face. The baby's cries spoke of genuine distress, not simple fussiness. Kenya's hands twitched with the urge to help, but she remained frozen by uncertainty and social barriers she'd learned to respect. A woman behind her whispered harshly to her husband, "Thank goodness we're back here. I demand a refund if I were stuck next to that noise." The judgment in her voice made Kenya's decision easier. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. "Miss, please return to your seat," the flight attendant said sharply as Kenya approached the first-class section. "This area is restricted." Kenya's voice was soft but firm. "I think I can help with the baby." The flight attendant looked her up and down, taking in Kenya's simple jeans and sweater, her economy ticket visible in her hand. "Are you a doctor?" "I work with children," Kenya said simply. "I have training in infant care." "We don't need some wannabe babysitter making things worse," the flight attendant replied dismissively. "Please return to your seat before I have to call security." But Dalton had heard the exchange. He looked up through exhausted eyes at the young woman standing quietly in the aisle. Something in her calm presence gave him hope. "Wait," he said, his voice hoarse from stress. "Let her try. Please. I'm willing to accept help from anyone at this point." The flight attendant's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she stepped aside reluctantly. Kenya approached slowly, keeping her movements gentle and non-threatening. "What's her name?" she asked softly. "Lily," Dalton whispered, still rocking his screaming daughter. "Hello, sweet Lily," Kenya said, her voice taking on a melodic quality that somehow cut through the baby's cries. "I know you're hurting, little one. We're going to figure out what's wrong." She held out her hands, not reaching for the baby but offering. "May I try holding her?" Dalton hesitated for only a moment before placing his daughter in Kenya's arms. The change was immediate and shocking. Lily's cries softened to whimpers, then to quiet snuffles. Within minutes, she was breathing peacefully against Kenya's shoulder. The cabin fell into stunned silence. Have you ever witnessed a moment that completely changed someone's life trajectory? A single act of kindness that rippled outward in ways no one could predict? If this story moves you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to light. Dalton stared in amazement as his daughter settled into Kenya's embrace. For the first time in months, Lily looked truly peaceful. And for the first time since Anna's death, Dalton felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone in this impossible job of being a parent. The silence that followed Lily's sudden calm felt almost sacred. Passengers who had been muttering complaints moments before now craned their necks to see what had happened. The woman in row 2 who had been so critical earlier actually leaned forward with curiosity rather than irritation. Kenya gently swayed with Lily, her movements natural and instinctive. The baby's tiny fist had wrapped around a strand of Kenya's hair, holding on as if she'd found exactly what she'd been searching for. "How did you do that?" Dalton whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break whatever spell Kenya had cast. "Sometimes babies just need a different energy," Kenya replied softly. "Your stress was feeding her distress. She could feel how worried you were." The flight attendant, Jennifer, watched with a mixture of amazement and embarrassment. She'd been so quick to dismiss this young woman based on appearances alone. I apologize for my earlier rudeness," she said quietly. "What you just did was remarkable." Kenya accepted the apology with grace. "We all make quick judgments sometimes. What matters is being willing to change our minds when we see the truth." A passenger from first class, a woman wearing expensive jewelry and designer clothes, approached cautiously. "Are you some kind of baby specialist? I've never seen anything like that." "I studied early childhood development," Kenya explained, still gently rocking Lily. "I work with families who are struggling with behavioral challenges in their children." The wealthy woman's expression shifted from curiosity to genuine interest. "My daughter could have used someone like you when her twins were born. They cried constantly for the first 6 months. Nearly drove the whole family crazy." More passengers began gathering around, drawn by their curiosity about the sudden peace that had descended over the cabin. A businessman who had been typing angrily on his laptop now stood to get a better look at the young woman who had accomplished the impossible. "What exactly did you do differently?" he asked. Kenya considered how to explain without making Dalton feel criticized. "Every baby communicates differently. Lily was telling us that she needed something specific. The way she arched away from her father's chest suggested she might have been overstimulated or uncomfortable. Sometimes changing the angle, the pressure, or even just the emotional energy can make all the difference." Dalton listened intently, absorbing every word. "I thought I was doing everything right. I fed her, changed her, tried to comfort her." "You were doing everything with love," Kenya assured him gently. "That's the most important part. Sometimes we just need to adjust our approach. Parenting isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn and try new things." An elderly woman from the back of the plane had made her way forward. "Young lady, you have a gift. I raised 5 children and worked as a pediatric nurse for 30 years. What you just did was pure instinct and skill combined." Kenya felt warmth spread through her chest at the validation. "Thank you. That means so much coming from someone with your experience." As the conversation continued, Lily remained peacefully asleep in Kenya's arms. Her breathing was deep and even, her tiny features relaxed for the first time since takeoff. Dalton couldn't stop staring at his daughter, amazed by the transformation. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "She hasn't slept this peacefully in weeks. What am I doing wrong?" "You're not doing anything wrong," Kenya said firmly. "You're grieving, you're stressed, and you're trying to do an incredibly difficult job alone. Babies pick up on all of that. It doesn't mean you love her any less or that you're failing her." The businessman nodded thoughtfully. "My wife and I went through something similar after our first child was born. We were both so anxious about doing everything perfectly that we made ourselves and the baby miserable. It wasn't until we relaxed and trusted our instincts that things improved." Jennifer, the flight attendant, returned with a pillow and blanket. "For the baby," she said to Kenya, then turned to Dalton. "Sir, I want to apologize for not being more supportive earlier. Flying with children is challenging enough without added pressure from airline staff." Dalton accepted the apology gracefully. "We're all learning as we go." The elderly nurse smiled. "That's the wisest thing any parent can say. The moment you think you have it all figured out, children will teach you something new." As the crowd began to disperse back to their seats, the wealthy woman lingered. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you work privately with families? I have friends who could really benefit from your expertise." Kenya felt a flutter of possibility in her chest. "I do some consulting work, but honestly, my dream is to open a childcare center that specializes in helping families navigate difficult situations like this." The woman's eyes lit up. "That sounds wonderful. The world needs more people like you who understand that children's behavior is communication, not defiance." Dalton had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. "A childcare center? That sounds like an incredible resource for parents." "It's just a dream right now," Kenya said with a slight smile. "But someday I hope to make it a reality." As the plane settled back into quiet conversation and the gentle hum of engines, Lily continued sleeping peacefully in Kenya's arms. Dalton found himself studying the young woman who had brought such immediate calm to his chaotic world. Her kindness was evident in every gesture, her competence undeniable. For the first time in months he felt a spark of hope. Maybe he wasn't as alone in this parenting journey as he'd thought. Maybe there were people in the world who could help him become the father Lily deserved. And maybe, just maybe, he'd found one of them at 30,000 feet above the clouds. As the night deepened outside the airplane windows, the cabin lights dimmed to encourage rest. But sleep was the furthest thing from Dalton's mind. He sat watching Kenya hold his daughter with a natural grace that seemed almost magical. Lily hadn't stirred in over an hour, her small body completely relaxed against Kenya's shoulder. "You should try to rest too," Kenya whispered to Dalton. "When did you last get a full night's sleep?" Dalton ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Honestly, I can't remember. Lily's been having trouble sleeping since my mother-in-law got sick. I've been managing everything alone, and I'm clearly not handling it well." "Managing a company and a toddler alone would challenge anyone," Kenya replied gently. "What kind of business do you run?" "Technology consulting. We help companies streamline their operations and improve efficiency." He paused, studying Kenya's face in the dim cabin light. "What about you? Besides being amazing with children, I mean." Kenya smiled softly. "I work for a private family right now, but before that I taught at a developmental preschool for children with special needs. I've always been drawn to the challenging cases, the kids that other people give up on." "Like Lily tonight?" Lily wasn't being difficult. She was communicating something important, and once we listened to what she was trying to tell us, everything changed. A flight attendant approached with 2 bottles of water and a small package of crackers. "Thought you might be thirsty," she said kindly. It was Jennifer, the same attendant who had been dismissive earlier, but her entire demeanor had transformed. "Thank you," Kenya said gratefully, accepting the water. Jennifer hesitated a moment before speaking again. "I owe you another apology. I made assumptions about you based on absolutely nothing but prejudice. What you did tonight taught everyone on this plane a lesson about not judging others." "We all have moments we're not proud of," Kenya replied with characteristic grace. "What matters is learning from them." After Jennifer moved on, Dalton leaned closer to Kenya. "You handle judgment with incredible dignity. That can't be easy." Kenya was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "I learned early that responding to negativity with more negativity never helps anyone. My grandmother used to say that kindness is the only response that has the power to change hearts." "Your grandmother sounds wise. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She worked 3 jobs to put me through college, never complained once about the sacrifice." Dalton felt a pang of recognition. "Loss changes everything, doesn't it? Anna, my wife, died in a car accident too. Lily was just 6 months old." Kenya's expression softened with understanding. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating. The hardest part is feeling like I'm failing Anna every day. She was such a natural mother. She would have known exactly how to calm Lily tonight. I feel like I'm stumbling through parenthood in the dark. Can I tell you something?" Kenya shifted slightly so she could look directly at Dalton. "Anna chose you to be Lily's father. She trusted you with the most precious thing in her world. That trust wasn't misplaced." Dalton felt emotion tighten his throat. "It doesn't feel that way most days. The fact that you're worried about being a good father proves that you are one. Bad parents don't question themselves or seek help when they need it." Around them, most passengers had settled into sleep or quiet activities. The wealthy woman from earlier approached again, moving carefully down the aisle. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly. "I'm Rebecca Thornton. I couldn't stop thinking about your child care center idea." Kenya looked up with interest. "Oh, hello again. I sit on the board of several charitable foundations. We're always looking for innovative programs that address real community needs. What you described sounds exactly like something we'd want to support." Dalton watched Kenya's eyes widen with surprise and hope. "That's incredibly generous of you to even consider. Would you be willing to share more details about your vision?" Rebecca asked, settling into the empty seat across the aisle. Kenya glanced at Dalton, who nodded encouragingly. "Well, I envision a center that serves families dealing with difficult behavioral challenges. We'd offer assessment services, parent education, respite care, and specialized programming for children who don't thrive in traditional daycare settings. Like children with sensory processing issues? Autism spectrum disorders? Trauma histories?" Rebecca asked. "Exactly. And children like Lily tonight, who might just need a different approach than what they're currently receiving." Dalton found himself leaning forward, caught up in Kenya's passion as she described her dreams. We'd also provide training for other childcare providers, sharing techniques that work for challenging situations. The goal would be to create a ripple effect of better understanding and care throughout the community. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. The need for services like that is enormous. Traditional childcare centers often can't accommodate children with special needs, leaving families with nowhere to turn. That's exactly the gap I want to fill, Kenya said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. What would you need to make this happen? Rebecca asked. Kenya looked overwhelmed by the question. Honestly, it feels so big sometimes. Funding for a building, equipment, staff training, licensing requirements. I've been saving money for years, but it feels like such a distant dream. Dreams have a way of becoming reality when the right people come together to support them, Rebecca said with a smile. I'd love to discuss this further once we're back on the ground. As Rebecca returned to her seat, Dalton studied Kenya's face. You light up when you talk about helping children. It's my calling, Kenya said simply. Some people are meant to build companies or create art. I'm meant to help children and families find their way through difficult times. Anna used to say the same thing about teaching. She believed education could change the world, one child at a time. Kenya smiled. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was. I think she would have liked you very much. In her arms, Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake. Kenya adjusted her position gently, maintaining the perfect angle that kept the baby comfortable and peaceful. You make that look effortless, Dalton observed. Experience helps, but mostly I just pay attention to what she's telling me. Every baby has their own language of movement and sound. Once you learn to speak their language, everything becomes easier. Dalton felt something shift inside him as he watched Kenya with his daughter. Hope, perhaps, or the first glimpse of what his life might look like with the right kind of help. For the first time since Anna's death, the future didn't look quite so overwhelming. As the plane settled into the quiet rhythm of a red-eye flight, most passengers dozed or read quietly. But in the small circle of first class where Dalton and Kenya sat with sleeping Lily, a different kind of journey was beginning. One measured not in miles, but in the slow building of trust and understanding between two people who had started as strangers. Can I ask you something? Dalton said softly, careful not to disturb his daughter who remained peacefully asleep in Kenya's arms. Of course. Earlier you mentioned that Lily was communicating something specific. What exactly did you hear in her cries that I missed? Kenya considered the question thoughtfully. It wasn't just the sound but the pattern and intensity. The way she arched away from your chest suggested overstimulation. The pitch of her cries indicated genuine distress rather than simple fussiness. And the timing told me she'd been building toward this meltdown for a while. I felt so helpless, Dalton admitted. Every technique that used to work just made things worse tonight. That happens sometimes. Children go through developmental changes that can temporarily disrupt their normal patterns. What worked last month might not work this month. Dalton nodded slowly. Anna always seemed to know intuitively what Lily needed. I feel like I'm constantly guessing and getting it wrong. Tell me about Anna, Kenya said gently. What kind of mother was she? A smile crossed Dalton's tired features. She was patient in ways I never understood. I remember coming home from work stressed about some crisis at the office, and she'd be sitting on the floor playing peekaboo with Lily, both of them laughing like it was the best game in the world. She had this ability to be completely present in the moment. That's a beautiful gift. She also worried about everything. Whether Lily was eating enough, sleeping enough, hitting her developmental milestones on time. I used to tease her about reading too many parenting books. His voice grew quieter. Now I wish I'd paid more attention to all that research. Kenya shifted Lily slightly, supporting the baby's head as she settled deeper into sleep. Grief changes how we parent. You're not just missing Anna as your partner, you're missing her as Lily's mother. That's a double loss. Exactly. Some days I feel angry that she left me to figure this out alone. Then I feel guilty for being angry about something she couldn't control. Those feelings are completely normal, Kenya assured him. Grief isn't linear, and it doesn't follow rules about what we should or shouldn't feel. A flight attendant passed by, offering blankets. Dalton accepted one and gently tucked it around Lily's sleeping form. The simple domestic gesture felt significant somehow, as if he was beginning to reclaim his role as her protector. What about you? He asked Kenya. You mentioned losing your parents young. How did that shape who you became? Kenya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Living with my grandmother taught me that love shows up in action, not just words. She worked herself to exhaustion to provide for me, never once making me feel like a burden. I learned that caring for others isn't a sacrifice, it's a privilege. That's a mature perspective for someone who lost so much so young. I had a choice to make: become bitter about what was taken from me, or become grateful for what remained. My grandmother made sure I understood that choice. Dalton found himself studying Kenya's profile in the dim cabin light. There was a strength in her features that spoke of someone who had faced difficulties and emerged stronger. Is that why you chose to work with challenging children? Partly. But also because those are the children who need advocates the most. The ones who get labeled as difficult, or impossible, are often just kids who haven't found their person yet. The adult who understands their language. Like you understood Lily tonight. Every child deserves someone who sees their potential instead of their problems. The conversation lulled into comfortable silence. Around them, the airplane hummed through the night sky. Other passengers slept or whispered quietly. The chaos of Lily's earlier meltdown felt like a distant memory. Can I tell you something I've never admitted out loud? Dalton asked suddenly. Kenya turned to look at him fully. Of course. Sometimes I wonder if Lily would be better off with someone else. Someone who actually knows what they're doing. Oh, Dalton. Kenya's voice was filled with compassion. That thought comes from love, not inadequacy. The fact that you want what's best for her, even if it means questioning yourself, shows how much you care. But what if I really am failing her? Look at her right now, Kenya said, gesturing to the peacefully sleeping child. She's healthy, she's loved, and she's surrounded by people who want to help both of you succeed. That's not failure. That's a foundation. Dalton reached out tentatively to stroke his daughter's soft hair. She looks so peaceful with you. She looks peaceful because she feels safe. And she feels safe because she knows you're here watching over her. I'm just the temporary solution. You're her constant. The words hit Dalton with unexpected force. He had been so focused on his mistakes, his inadequacies, that he'd lost sight of the fundamental truth. Lily was safe because of his love, not in spite of his imperfections. Anna used to say that parenting was about showing up every day, even when you don't know what you're doing. She was right. Competence grows from consistency, not perfection. As if sensing the shift in her father's emotional state, Lily stirred slightly and opened her eyes. Instead of crying, she looked around calmly, taking in her surroundings. When her gaze found Dalton, she reached out her small hand toward him. I think she's ready to come back to you, Kenya said with a gentle smile. Dalton accepted his daughter back into his arms, and for the first time in weeks, Lily settled against his chest without protest. She tucked her head under his chin and closed her eyes again, completely content. How does this feel different than before? Kenya asked. Dalton considered the question. I'm not afraid anymore. Before tonight, I was always tense, waiting for the next meltdown. Right now, I just feel grateful. That's what she needed from you. Not perfect technique, just presence without anxiety. As father and daughter found their rhythm together, Kenya felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with professional pride. She had helped heal something broken, had reminded a family of their connection to each other. The plane continued its journey through the night, carrying its passengers toward their destinations. But for Dalton, Kenya, and baby Lily, the most important journey was just beginning. The plane began its descent as dawn painted the sky in soft pastels outside the windows. Lily had slept peacefully for the remaining hours of the flight, waking only once to take a bottle from her father with none of the struggle that had marked their earlier attempts. As passengers began stirring and preparing for landing, Dalton found himself reluctant for the journey to end. The cocoon of understanding that had formed around his small group felt precious and fragile. What happens now? He asked Kenya as they prepared for landing. Now you go to your sister's wedding and I go to my connecting flight to Chicago, Kenya replied, but something in her voice suggested she was equally reluctant to see their time together end. About that, Dalton said, his voice taking on a more formal tone. I have a proposition for you. Kenya raised an eyebrow, curious. Lily clearly responds to you in ways she doesn't with anyone else. I'd like to offer you a position as her nanny. Full-time, excellent salary, benefits, and complete support for pursuing your childcare center dream. The offer hung in the air between them. Kenya felt her heart race with possibility, but also with uncertainty. That's incredibly generous, but... Please don't say no immediately, Dalton interrupted gently. At least think about it. Spend a few days with us. See how it feels. If it doesn't work out, I'll pay for your flights home and compensate you for your time. Kenya looked down at Lily, who was gazing up at her with bright, trusting eyes. The baby reached out and grabbed her finger, holding on with surprising strength. I don't want to uproot my entire life based on one airplane encounter, Kenya said slowly. Then don't think of it as uprooting your life. Think of it as accepting help to build the life you want. The logic was sound, and Kenya had to admit that her current position was temporary anyway. The family she worked for was moving overseas next month, leaving her unemployed and searching for new opportunities. If I said yes, what exactly would you expect from me? Help me become a better father. Teach me what you know about child development. Be Lily's advocate when I don't understand what she needs. Dalton paused. And let me help you turn your child care center dream into reality. The last part caught Kenya off guard. What do you mean? I mean funding, connections, business expertise. I can provide the resources to make it happen, and you can provide the vision and expertise. Kenya felt overwhelming gratitude wash over her. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about but never expected to find. I would accept your offer with complete gratitude, she said firmly. Thank you for believing in me. The plane touched down smoothly, and as they gathered their belongings, other passengers stopped to wish them well. Rebecca Thornton pressed a business card into Kenya's hand. Call me next week, she said with a warm smile. I've been thinking about our conversation all night, and I have some ideas about funding sources for your center. The elderly nurse who had supported Kenya earlier patted her arm gently. You're going to change that little girl's life, dear? And probably her father's too. Even Jennifer, the flight attendant, approached as they prepared to disembark. Thank you for teaching us all something important tonight. I won't forget the lesson about not judging people before I know their stories. As they walked through the airport together, Lily riding contentedly in her father's arms, Kenya marveled at how dramatically her life had changed in the span of a single flight. 12 hours ago, she'd been a woman with big dreams and limited options. Now she was walking toward a future that felt full of possibilities. Are you nervous? Dalton asked as they waited for his driver outside baggage claim. Terrified, Kenya admitted with a laugh. But also excited. When was the last time you took a leap of faith? When I started my company 10 years ago. Anna thought I was crazy to leave my secure job to chase an idea that existed only in my head. How did that work out? Better than I ever imagined. Until Anna died and I realized that success in business doesn't automatically translate to success in life. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and a uniformed driver stepped out to greet them. As he loaded their luggage, Kenya couldn't help but feel a moment of culture shock. This level of wealth was foreign to her experience. Does the fancy lifestyle make you uncomfortable? Dalton asked, noting her expression. A little, Kenya admitted honestly. I've never lived in a world where people have drivers and private jets. Then we'll figure it out together. I've never lived in a world where someone understood my daughter better than I do. The drive to Dalton's estate took them through increasingly upscale neighborhoods until they arrived at electronic gates that opened to reveal a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a house that looked more like a small resort. This is beautiful, Kenya said, genuinely impressed by the elegant architecture and thoughtful landscaping. Anna designed most of it, Dalton said softly. She had incredible taste and vision for creating spaces that felt welcoming rather than intimidating. As they entered the house, Kenya was struck by how warm and comfortable it felt despite its size. Family photos lined the hallways, and children's toys were scattered throughout the living areas in a way that made the space feel lived in and loved. A woman in her 60s appeared in the foyer, her face lighting up when she saw Dalton and Lily. Mrs. Henderson, this is Kenya Parker. She'll be staying with us for a while to help with Lily. Mrs. Henderson, whom Kenya quickly learned was the housekeeper who had worked for the family since before Lily's birth, welcomed her warmly. Any friend of this little angel is a friend of mine, she said, cooing at Lily who responded with delighted babbling. Kenya has a gift with children, Dalton explained. She managed to calm Lily during a 3-hour crying episode on the plane. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened with respect. My goodness, you must be something special. That little one has been testing all of us lately. As they toured the house, Kenya was shown to a beautiful guest suite with its own sitting area and bathroom. The room overlooked the gardens and had clearly been prepared with care and attention to detail. This is lovely, thank you, Kenya said, setting down her suitcase. Take some time to settle in, Dalton suggested. We have my sister's wedding tomorrow, but today can be about getting comfortable and seeing how we all fit together. As Kenya unpacked her few belongings in the spacious closet, she reflected on the surreal nature of her situation. Yesterday morning she'd been dreading her unemployment and uncertain future. Today she was living in a mansion with a job that could launch her career and a man who seemed genuinely committed to helping her achieve her dreams. From downstairs, she could hear Lily's laughter mixed with Dalton's voice as they played together. The sound filled her with contentment and purpose. This felt right in ways she couldn't fully explain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend in Chicago. "How was the flight? Meet any interesting people?" Kenya smiled as she typed back, "You could say that. My entire life just changed at 30,000 feet." The next morning brought warm sunshine and the gentle chaos of preparing for a wedding. Kenya woke early, drawn to the window by the sound of Lily's laughter from the garden below. She looked out to see Dalton pushing his daughter on a small swing set, both of them seeming more relaxed than she had ever seen them. After dressing in a simple sundress, Kenya made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson preparing breakfast in a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said warmly. "I hope you slept well. There's fresh coffee and fruit if you'd like something light before the main breakfast." "Thank you, that's perfect." Kenya accepted a cup of coffee and stepped onto the back patio where Dalton and Lily were playing. "Good morning," Dalton called out, lifting Lily from the swing. Someone was asking for Kenya this morning. At the sound of her name, Lily reached toward Kenya with both arms, babbling excitedly. Kenya laughed and accepted the child, spinning her gently as Lily shrieked with delight. "She seems like a different baby than the one on the plane," Kenya observed. "We both are," Dalton said quietly. "I actually slept for 6 hours straight last night. I can't remember the last time that happened." They spent the morning in comfortable domestic routine. Kenya helped Lily with breakfast while Dalton handled last-minute wedding preparations. The easy way they moved around each other, anticipating needs and sharing responsibilities, felt natural and right. Around noon, Dalton's sister Claire arrived with her fiancé Tom to pick up some items she had stored at the house. She was a petite woman with Dalton's same dark hair and warm brown eyes, and her energy filled the room immediately. "So you're the miracle worker I heard about," Claire said, embracing Kenya warmly after Dalton made introductions. "My brother called me this morning and actually sounded happy for the first time in months." "I just helped with a difficult flight," Kenya replied modestly. "Don't listen to her," Dalton interjected. "She completely transformed how Lily responds to caregiving. And she's brilliant about child development." Claire studied Kenya with interest. "Dalton mentioned you want to open a childcare center. That sounds amazing." "It's been a dream of mine for years," Kenya said, bouncing Lily gently as the toddler played with her necklace. "I want to create a place that serves families dealing with behavioral challenges, developmental differences, or traumatic histories." "That's exactly what our community needs," Tom added. He was a pediatrician, Kenya learned, and dealt regularly with families struggling to find appropriate care for their children. Traditional daycare centers often can't accommodate kids with special needs. Or they charge so much extra that families can't afford it, Claire added. Which creates this horrible situation where parents have to choose between working and caring for their children. Dalton had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement. What if we made it happen? Not someday but now. Kenya looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? I mean funding it completely. Buying land, building the facility, hiring staff, covering operating costs until it becomes self-sustaining. The offer was so generous it took Kenya's breath away. That would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Probably closer to $1 million actually if we want to do it right, Dalton said matter-of-factly. But money isn't the constraint here. Vision and expertise are, and you have both. Kenya felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was suggesting. Why would you do something like that for someone you barely know? Because you gave me hope when I was drowning in despair. Because you saw potential in my daughter when others saw only problems. And because I have the resources to make good things happen, and this feels like the best possible use of those resources. Claire clapped her hands together excitedly. This is incredible. Kenya, you have to say yes. But it's such an enormous gift, Kenya protested. I don't know how I could ever repay something like that. You don't repay gifts, Dalton said gently. You use them to create more good in the world. Which is exactly what you'd be doing. Kenya looked down at Lily, who was studying her face with serious concentration, as if sensing the importance of the moment. The baby reached up and patted Kenya's cheek gently, babbling something that sounded remarkably like yes. Everyone laughed at Lily's apparent input on the decision. Even she thinks you should accept, Claire said with a grin. Kenya felt tears prick her eyes as the reality of the opportunity sank in. This was everything she had ever dreamed of, being offered by someone who barely knew her but believed in her potential. The gratitude she felt was almost overwhelming. I accept, she said, her voice thick with emotion. With complete gratitude and humility. Thank you for believing in me. Dalton's face broke into the first truly bright smile Kenya had seen from him. Thank you for letting me be part of making it happen. The rest of the day passed in a blur of wedding preparations and excited planning. While getting ready for the ceremony, Kenya called her grandmother to share the news. Baby girl, that man sees something special in you, her grandmother said, her voice warm with pride. But don't forget that you earned this opportunity by being exactly who you are. The wedding itself was beautiful, held in the garden of a historic estate with Lily serving as an adorable flower girl. Kenya watched from the guest section as Dalton walked his sister down the aisle, his love for his family evident in every gesture. During the reception, Kenya found herself in conversation with other guests about the Child Care Center project. Word had spread quickly about Dalton's generous sponsorship of her dream, and several people expressed interest in supporting the initiative. We need more people like you in this world, said an older woman who introduced herself as a retired social worker. Someone who sees children's behavior as communication rather than defiance. As the evening wound down, Kenya and Dalton found themselves sitting together at a quiet table, watching Lily sleep peacefully in her stroller despite the ongoing celebration around them. Are you sure about this? Kenya asked. It's such a huge commitment. I've never been more sure of anything, Dalton replied. Watching you with Lily, hearing your vision for helping other families, this feels like the most important investment I've ever made. Kenya reached across the table and squeezed his hand gratefully. I promise I won't let you down. You couldn't if you tried, Dalton said softly. You've already given me the greatest gift possible, hope for the future. As they prepared to leave the reception, carrying sleeping Lily between them like the family unit they were quickly becoming, Kenya marveled at how much her life had transformed in just 2 days. She had found not only a career opportunity beyond her wildest dreams, but also a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since her grandmother's death. The future stretched ahead full of possibility, built on a foundation of unexpected kindness and mutual trust between strangers who were becoming something much more meaningful to each other. 3 weeks into her new life with the Cole family, Kenya had settled into a routine that felt both natural and surreal. Each morning brought new discoveries about Lily's personality and preferences, and each evening brought deeper conversations with Dalton about their shared vision for the Child Care Center. The project had taken on a life of its own. Architects had been consulted, land had been purchased, and a timeline had been established that would see the center opening within 8 months. Kenya found herself involved in every decision, her input valued and her expertise respected in ways that still amazed her. The playground design looks perfect, Dalton said, spreading the latest blueprints across his home office desk while Lily played with blocks nearby. The sensory garden will be incredible for children who need that kind of stimulation. Kenya leaned over the plans, her shoulder brushing against his as they studied the details. The casual contact sent a flutter through her chest that she was trying hard to ignore. Over the past weeks, her feelings for Dalton had grown beyond professional respect and gratitude into something deeper and more complicated. I love how the indoor and outdoor spaces flow together, she said, forcing herself to focus on the plans rather than his proximity. Children need to feel connected to nature. Like Lily does, Dalton observed, glancing at his daughter who had abandoned her toys in favor of examining a ladybug that had somehow found its way inside. She's happiest when she's exploring. She's thriving, Kenya agreed. The tantrums have almost completely stopped, and she's hitting all her developmental milestones ahead of schedule. Because she has consistency and understanding now. Because she has you. The words hung in the air between them, carrying weight beyond their surface meaning. Kenya felt heat rise in her cheeks as she met Dalton's gaze. We should probably head to the fundraising lunch, she said, stepping back from the desk in the intensity of the moment. Rebecca said some potential board members want to meet me. The lunch was being held at an upscale restaurant downtown, attended by some of the city's most prominent philanthropists and business leaders. Kenya had been nervous about the event, but her weeks of planning and preparation with Dalton had built her confidence. You're going to be wonderful, Dalton assured her as they rode in the car together. Lily was spending the afternoon with Mrs. Henderson, who had become completely devoted to the child. What if they don't take me seriously? Most of them have been involved in charity work longer than I've been alive. Then they'll learn something today about the power of fresh perspectives and genuine passion. The lunch exceeded Kenya's expectations. Her presentation about the center's mission and methodology was met with enthusiastic questions and immediate pledges of support. Several attendees shared stories of their own struggles finding appropriate care for children with special needs. This is exactly what our community has been missing, said Dr. Patricia Williams, a prominent pediatrician who served on multiple nonprofit boards. Your approach to behavioral challenges is revolutionary. During the cocktail hour that followed, Kenya found herself surrounded by people eager to learn more about her background and vision. Dalton watched from across the room, his pride evident in his expression. "She's remarkable," Rebecca Thornton said, joining him at the bar. "Brilliant, passionate, and completely genuine. You found yourself quite a treasure." "She's going to change lives," Dalton replied, his eyes never leaving Kenya as she spoke animatedly with a group of potential volunteers. "I wasn't talking about her professional abilities," Rebecca said with a knowing smile. "Though those are obviously impressive too." Dalton turned to look at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Oh please. The way you two look at each other, the way you move around each other like you're choreographed. Anyone with eyes can see what's happening between you." Dalton felt heat rise in his neck. "It's not like that. She works for me. She's helping with Lily." Rebecca said skeptically. "And I'm sure that's all it is." Before Dalton could respond, Kenya appeared at his side, her face glowing with excitement. "Dr. Williams wants to volunteer as the center's pediatric consultant," she said breathlessly. "And 3 families have already asked to be put on the waiting list for enrollment." "That's incredible," Dalton said, his pride in her accomplishment mixing with something deeper as he looked at her animated expression. "I can't believe this is actually happening," Kenya continued. "6 months ago this was just a dream I talked about to my reflection in the mirror. Now it's real." "Dreams have a way of becoming reality when the right people believe in them," Rebecca said meaningfully, looking between Kenya and Dalton with obvious satisfaction. The drive home was comfortable and quiet, both of them processing the success of the afternoon. When they arrived at the house, they found Mrs. Henderson in the garden with Lily, who was toddling around with increasing confidence. "Mama," Lily said clearly as Kenya approached, reaching up with both arms. Kenya froze, her heart catching in her throat. It was the first time Lily had used that word, and while Kenya knew it was just developmental babbling, the sound of it struck her deeply. "She's been saying that all afternoon," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "I think someone is getting attached." Dalton watched as Kenya lifted Lily, the baby immediately snuggling against her shoulder with complete trust and contentment. The sight of them together filled him with an emotion so strong it was almost overwhelming. That evening, after Lily had been bathed and put to bed with her usual peaceful ease, Kenya and Dalton found themselves alone on the back patio. The late summer air was warm and filled with the sound of crickets. "Today felt like a turning point," Kenya said, curled up in one of the comfortable outdoor chairs. "In more ways than one," Dalton replied quietly. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with something internal. "Kenya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know you can be completely honest without worrying about your job or the center project." Her heart began to race. "Okay. Are you feeling what I'm feeling? This connection between us that goes beyond Lily, beyond the work we're doing together?" The question hung in the warm night air between them. Kenya felt her breath catch as she met his gaze, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I've been trying not to because everything is so complicated and I don't want to mess up what we've built." "I've been trying not to feel it too," Dalton admitted. "But watching you today, seeing how incredible you are with people, with Lily, with everything you touch, I can't ignore it anymore." He stood and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so they were at eye level. "I haven't felt this way about anyone since Anna. I wasn't sure I ever would again." Kenya reached out to touch his face gently. "I've never felt anything like this before. You and Lily have changed everything about what I want from life." When he kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was searching for. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "What happens now?" Kenya asked softly. "Now we stop pretending this is just about work," Dalton replied, taking her hands in his. "Now we see where this goes together." From inside the house, they could hear the faint sound of Lily babbling in her sleep, and it felt like benediction on their new beginning. The months that followed their first kiss passed in a whirlwind of construction, planning, and deepening love. Kenya and Dalton worked side by side every day, their professional partnership seamlessly blending with their growing personal relationship. Lily, now walking confidently and chattering constantly, seemed to thrive on the positive energy surrounding her small family. "The kitchen equipment arrived this morning," Dalton announced over breakfast, scrolling through messages on his phone while Lily decorated her high chair with pieces of scrambled egg. "Already?" Kenya looked up from the licensing paperwork she was reviewing. We're actually going to open on schedule. Ahead of schedule if the final inspections go well next week. The Bright Beginnings Child Development Center had exceeded every expectation. What had started as Kenya's dream to help struggling families had evolved into a comprehensive facility offering daycare, therapeutic services, parent education, and community support programs. The waiting list for enrollment had grown to over 100 families. Dr. Williams confirmed she'll be available for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Kenya said, checking her own list of tasks. And the mayor's office called to say they want to present us with a community service award at the opening. Dalton reached across the table to squeeze her hand. You deserve all the recognition in the world for what you've created. We've created, Kenya corrected firmly. None of this would exist without your vision and support. Their relationship had developed with the same careful attention and natural flow that characterized everything else in their partnership. There had been no drama, no uncertainty, just a steady deepening of love and commitment that felt as inevitable as sunrise. Lily banged her spoon against her tray, demanding attention from both adults. Up, she commanded clearly. Up, Mama. The word no longer caused Kenya to hesitate. Over the months, she had naturally stepped into the role of Lily's mother, with Dalton's complete support and encouragement. Anna's memory was honored through photos and stories, but Kenya had found her own place in their family without trying to replace anyone. Someone wants to help with the center tour today, Kenya said, unbuckling Lily from her high chair. They spent the morning at the construction site, doing a final walkthrough before the official opening in 2 weeks. Kenya walked through the bright, cheerful rooms with wonder, still amazed that her dream had taken such beautiful physical form. The infant room had rocking chairs positioned near large windows, with soft lighting and carefully chosen colors designed to be soothing for overstimulated children. The toddler area featured sensory playstations and quiet retreat spaces for children who needed breaks from group activities. The school-age room had flexible learning spaces that could be reconfigured based on individual needs. The sensory garden is perfect, Kenya said, standing in the outdoor play area they had designed with input from occupational therapists. Look how the pathways create both open spaces and cozy hiding spots. And the therapy rooms have all the equipment Dr. Williams requested, Dalton added, opening the door to one of 3 specialized spaces designed for individual work with children. Lily toddled between them, babbling a running commentary on everything she saw. Her vocabulary was expanding daily, and her confidence in exploring new environments had grown tremendously. She's going to love playing here with other children, Kenya observed. Speaking of which, Dalton said, his tone shifting to something more serious. I have something to ask you. Kenya turned to face him fully, recognizing the importance of whatever he was about to say. Kenya Parker, you came into my life when I was drowning in despair and transformed everything. You saved my relationship with my daughter, helped me become the father she deserved, and showed me what it means to love again. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Will you marry me? Kenya gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth. The ring was simple and elegant, a solitaire diamond that caught the morning light streaming through the windows. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course, yes. As Dalton slipped the ring onto her finger, Lily clapped her hands and shouted, "Yay!" with perfect timing, making both adults laugh through their tears. She approves, Kenya said, scooping up the toddler who was bouncing with excitement. She's been in on the planning, Dalton admitted. I asked her permission last week. She said yes very clearly. Kenya kissed both of them, overwhelmed with gratitude for the family she had found in the most unexpected way. The engagement news spread quickly through their community of supporters. Rebecca Thornton hosted an impromptu celebration lunch, attended by many of the same people who had first heard Kenya's vision for the childcare center. This is the most beautiful love story, Dr. Williams said, raising her glass in a toast. 2 people who found each other through their shared commitment to helping children. To Kenya and Dalton, Rebecca added, may your marriage be as successful as your professional partnership. That evening, Kenya called her grandmother to share the news. I knew it the moment you told me about that airplane ride, her grandmother said, her voice warm with satisfaction. A man who sees your worth that quickly and supports your dreams that completely is a man worth keeping. It still feels like a fairy tale sometimes, Kenya admitted. Good fairy tales aren't about perfect people living perfect lives, her grandmother replied. They're about people who choose love and kindness and work to create something beautiful together. As they planned their wedding for the spring, Kenya and Dalton decided to make it a celebration of community as well as love. They invited all the families enrolled at Bright Beginnings, the construction workers who had built the center, and the many volunteers who had supported the project. Our story started with strangers becoming family, Kenya said as they addressed wedding invitations. It feels right to celebrate with the extended family we've built together. The center's opening day arrived with perfect autumn weather and more media attention than they had expected. Local television stations covered the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and the story of the childcare center's origins became a feel-good piece that aired across the region. From a crying baby on an airplane to a thriving family and community resource, the reporter concluded. Kenya Parker and Dalton Cole's love story proves that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single act of kindness. Watching families explore their new facility, seeing children with special needs finding spaces designed specifically for their comfort and growth, Kenya felt the deep satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. "Are you happy?" Dalton asked, slipping his arm around her waist as they watched Lily play with other toddlers in the sensory garden. "Completely," Kenya replied, leaning into his embrace. "This is everything I ever dreamed of and more than I ever thought possible." "It's just the beginning," Dalton said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We have a whole lifetime of building dreams together." Spring arrived with an explosion of blooms in the garden, as if nature itself was celebrating Kenya and Dalton's upcoming wedding. The ceremony was planned for the same day as Bright Beginnings' 6-month anniversary celebration, creating a double joy that had energized their entire community. "The caterers will set up the reception tables here in the sensory garden," Kenya explained to her wedding coordinator, gesturing across the outdoor space that had become the heart of their childcare center. "The children can play while the adults celebrate." 2 weeks before the wedding, Kenya received an unexpected phone call that brought tears to her eyes. "Is this Kenya Parker?" the familiar voice asked. "Jennifer?" From the airplane. Kenya couldn't hide her excitement at hearing from the flight attendant who had initially dismissed her but later apologized. "The very same. I've been following your story through the news coverage of your center. I had to call and tell you how inspired I've been by everything you've accomplished." "That's so kind of you to say. Actually, I'm calling because I'll be in town next week, and I was wondering if you'd mind if I visited the center. I've been thinking a lot about that night and how wrong I was to judge you based on assumptions." "Of course you're welcome to visit," Kenya said warmly. "And Jennifer? You're invited to our wedding if you're still in town. It's next Saturday at the center. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Word of the wedding had spread far beyond their immediate community. Families whose children attended the center had taken ownership of the celebration, organizing volunteer committees to handle flowers, decorations, and coordination with vendors. "It's like planning a wedding for the whole neighborhood," Mrs. Henderson observed, laughing as she supervised the delivery of tables and chairs. "Half the city seems to be involved somehow." The night before the wedding, Kenya's grandmother arrived from Chicago, the first time she'd been able to visit since Kenya's new life began. At 82, she moved slowly but with dignity, her eyes bright with curiosity about everything she'd heard described over the phone. "Oh honey," she said, embracing Kenya on the front steps of the Cole house. "Look at this beautiful life you've built." "I can hardly believe it myself sometimes," Kenya admitted, leading her grandmother inside to meet Lily, who was now 26 months old and bursting with personality. "Grandma Great," Lily announced solemnly when introduced, having been practicing the title for weeks. "That's exactly right, sweet baby," Kenya's grandmother said, kneeling carefully to accept Lily's enthusiastic hug. "I'm your Grandma Great and I've been waiting so long to meet you." That evening, Rebecca Thornton hosted a rehearsal dinner at her estate, attended by what felt like half the community. Kenya looked around the room at faces that had become familiar and dear over the past year. Dr. Williams, who had become both a professional colleague and personal friend, the construction workers who had built their center with pride and attention to detail, families whose children had flourished under the center's care, and dozens of others who had become part of their extended family. "A year ago, none of us knew each other," Dalton said during his toast to the gathered crowd. "Now we're family, bound together by shared purpose and genuine affection. Tomorrow we're not just celebrating a wedding, we're celebrating the power of community to transform lives. Do you believe in the ripple effect of kindness? How one act of compassion can spread outward, touching lives in ways we never imagined. If Kenya and Dalton's story inspires you to believe in the magic of second chances and unexpected love, please subscribe for more heartwarming stories and share your own experiences with life-changing kindness in the comments below. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright, with just enough breeze to keep the spring air fresh and comfortable. Kenya woke early in the guest house where she'd spent her final night as a single woman, surrounded by her closest friends from Chicago who had arrived to serve as her bridesmaids. "You look radiant," her grandmother said as they put the finishing touches on Kenya's simple but elegant dress. "Love suits you, baby girl." At the center, volunteers had transformed the sensory garden into a wedding venue worthy of a magazine spread. White chairs arranged in curved rows faced an arch covered in climbing roses and baby's breath. The children's play areas had been decorated with ribbons and flowers but remained accessible, ensuring that the youngest guests could participate comfortably in the celebration. As guests arrived, Kenya watched from the bridal suite window with growing emotion. Jennifer, the flight attendant, had indeed returned and was chatting animatedly with some of the center families. The elderly nurse from their original flight had brought her husband, both beaming with grandparental pride. Even some of the passengers who had initially been annoyed by Lily's crying had driven hours to attend, their presence a testament to how deeply the story had touched people. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Kenya's grandmother asked, adjusting the simple veil that had been her own grandmother's. "More than ready," Kenya replied, looking out at the gathering crowd. "This feels like the culmination of everything good that's happened in the past year." The processional began with Lily as flower girl, toddling down the aisle with serious concentration as she scattered rose petals from a small basket. When she reached the front, she raised her arms triumphantly and announced, "All done," to the delighted laughter of the guests. Kenya walked down the aisle on her grandmother's arm, too emotional to focus on individual faces but feeling the warmth and support radiating from the crowd. When she reached Dalton, who stood waiting with tears in his eyes, she felt complete in a way she had never experienced before. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she joined him beneath the flower-covered arch. "We're beautiful," she corrected softly. The ceremony itself was personal and meaningful, with vows they had written themselves reflecting their shared journey from strangers to partners to family. Dr. Williams served as officiant, having become ordained specifically for their wedding. "Love is not just a feeling," she said during her remarks. "It's a choice we make every day to support each other's dreams, to forgive each other's mistakes, and to build something together that's stronger than what we could create alone." Kenya and Dalton, you've already proven your commitment to this kind of love through the family you've created and the community you've served. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the crowd could probably be heard for blocks. Lily clapped and shouted, "Yay!" just as she had during the proposal, making everyone laugh through their tears. The reception was a joyful celebration that lasted well into the evening. Children played in the specially decorated play areas while adults danced to live music in the garden. The community had truly embraced this as their celebration too. "This is the most beautiful wedding I've ever attended," Jennifer said during the reception, embracing Kenya warmly. "Thank you for teaching me such an important lesson about judging people. It's changed how I interact with passengers every single day." "Thank you for coming," Kenya replied. "Having you here makes everything feel complete." As the sun began to set, painting the garden in golden light, Kenya and Dalton took a quiet moment away from the celebration to stand together in the children's play area where they had first talked about their dreams. "A year ago, I was a desperate father with a crying baby on an airplane," Dalton said, pulling his wife close. "And I was an unemployed nanny with big dreams and no clear path forward," Kenya added. "Now look at us," Dalton marveled. "Married, running a thriving center that's helping dozens of families, surrounded by community we never expected to find." From across the garden, they could hear their guests laughing and celebrating, see Lily being passed from person to person like the beloved child of the entire community she had become. "Do you think Anna would approve?" Kenya asked softly. It was the first time she had directly mentioned Dalton's first wife, but the moment felt right for acknowledging the foundation of love that had made their own love possible. "I think she would love you exactly as much as I do," Dalton replied without hesitation. "She would be proud of the mother you've become to Lily and grateful that we found each other." As they rejoined their celebration, walking hand in hand back toward their family and friends, Kenya reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Sometimes the most important changes in life begin with the smallest acts of courage, and she was grateful she had found the strength to stand up on that airplane and offer help to a struggling father and his crying baby. Their love story was just beginning, but it was already a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of community, and the magic that happens when people choose to build something beautiful together. 6 months after their wedding, Kenya and Dalton had settled into the rhythm of married life with the same natural ease that had marked every milestone in their relationship. Bright Beginnings was thriving beyond their wildest expectations, serving over 200 children and their families while maintaining a waiting list that stretched for months. The center had become a model for other communities, with delegations visiting regularly to learn about their approach to inclusive childcare and family support. Kenya had been invited to speak at conferences across the country, sharing her philosophy that children's challenging behaviors were communication rather than defiance. The article in Early Childhood Education Today was incredible, Dr. Williams said during their monthly board meeting. 3 universities have reached out about partnering with us for research studies. And the State Education Department wants to use our program as a pilot for their new inclusion initiative, Rebecca Thornton added, shuffling through papers with obvious satisfaction. Kenya listened to these updates with a sense of surreal pride. The scared young woman who had hesitated to approach a crying baby on an airplane had become a recognized expert whose work was influencing policy and practice far beyond their small community. The most important success, she said during her report to the board, is that we're seeing remarkable progress in children who were previously considered difficult to serve. Our data shows significant improvements in social skills, emotional regulation, and school readiness across all our programs. After the meeting, Kenya and Dalton walked through the center together, their evening ritual of checking on the spaces they had built with so much love and intention. Lily toddled between them, now almost 3 years old and full of opinions about everything she encountered. Miss Sarah said I can help with the babies tomorrow, Lily announced proudly, referring to one of the infant room teachers who had become her special friend. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Kenya replied, smiling at her daughter's eagerness to help care for others. You're such a good helper with younger children. They stopped in the main hallway, where a large photo display showed highlights from the center's first year. There were pictures from their opening day, children engaged in various activities, families at community events, and staff celebrations. In the center of the display was a photo from their wedding day, showing Kenya, Dalton, and Lily surrounded by their extended community family. Look, Mama, Lily said, pointing to the wedding photo. That's us being happy. Yes, baby, Kenya said, lifting Lily into her arms. That's us being very happy. As they prepared to leave for the day, Kenya felt a familiar wave of nausea that had been plaguing her for the past week. She had been attributing it to stress from the center's expansion plans, but as she calculated dates in her head, a different possibility occurred to her. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Kenya sat on the bathroom floor staring at a pregnancy test with shaking hands. 2 pink lines stared back at her, clear and unmistakable. She was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a mixture of joy, excitement, and nervousness that left her breathless. She and Dalton had talked about expanding their family, but in abstract terms as something that might happen in the future. Now the future had arrived with startling suddenness. She found Dalton in his home office, reviewing architectural plans for the center's second location. The sight of him bent over the blueprints, completely absorbed in their shared vision, filled her with overwhelming love. Dalton, she said softly from the doorway. He looked up with a smile that transformed his face. Hey beautiful. How are you feeling? You looked a little green around the edges today. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. I have some news. Something in her tone made him set down his pen and give her his full attention. What kind of news? Kenya pulled the pregnancy test from behind her back, holding it out like an offering. The life-changing kind. Dalton stared at the test for a long moment, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to pure joy. Really? Really, Kenya confirmed, tears already starting to fall. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while they both laughed and cried simultaneously. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands with such tenderness it took her breath away. Another baby, he whispered in amazement. Another child to love. Are you happy? Kenya asked, suddenly needing reassurance despite his obvious joy. I'm beyond happy. I'm grateful and excited and completely overwhelmed by how blessed we are. He kissed her gently. How are you feeling about it? All of the above, Kenya admitted. Plus terrified about managing a pregnancy while running the center and raising Lily. We'll figure it out together, Dalton assured her. We always do. The next morning brought the challenge of deciding when and how to share their news. They decided to tell Mrs. Henderson first, knowing that her practical support would be essential in the months ahead. Oh my goodness, the older woman exclaimed, clasping her hands together with delight. Another baby. This house is going to be full of such joy. We're hoping you'll help us figure out how to manage everything, Kenya said. Between the center and Lily, life is already pretty complicated. Sweetheart, managing chaos is what I do best, Mrs. Henderson replied with a laugh. Plus, I can't think of anything more wonderful than a house full of children who are loved and wanted. They decided to wait until after the first trimester to make a public announcement, but keeping the secret proved more difficult than expected. Kenya's morning sickness made it hard to maintain her usual energy level, and several staff members at the center began asking if she felt well. "You should go home early today," Dr. Williams suggested during one particularly difficult morning. "Whatever bug you're fighting seems persistent." "I'm fine," Kenya insisted, then promptly had to excuse herself to be sick in the staff bathroom. When she emerged, she found Dr. Williams waiting with a knowing smile. "How far along are you? Is it that obvious?" Kenya asked with chagrin. "Only to someone who's seen as many pregnant women as I have." "Congratulations, honey. This is wonderful news." Word spread gradually through their circle of closest friends and colleagues, each person responding with the same joy and excitement that had marked every milestone in Kenya and Dalton's relationship. Their community had invested so deeply in their family's happiness that the pregnancy felt like a gift to everyone. 3 months later, at their official announcement gathering, Kenya stood before the assembled crowd of center families, board members, and community supporters with her hand resting on her newly visible bump. "Dalton and I have some news to share," she began, her voice strong with happiness. "Our family is growing. We're expecting a baby in October." The cheer that went up was reminiscent of their wedding day, full of genuine joy and celebration. Children clapped excitedly, parents offered congratulations, and several people wiped away happy tears. "This is the most loved baby in the world already," Rebecca Thornton observed, giving Kenya a warm hug. "What a lucky child to be born into this community." As the celebration continued around them, Kenya found herself thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a single woman with big dreams and uncertain prospects. Now she was surrounded by family and friends, professionally successful beyond her wildest imagination, and expecting her second child with a man who supported and cherished her completely. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, appearing at her side with Lily balanced on his hip. "Just marveling at how much can change in such a short time," Kenya replied, accepting a kiss from both her husband and daughter. "The best changes are the ones that happen gradually," Dalton observed, "built on a foundation of trust and shared purpose." Later that evening, as they tucked Lily into bed, their daughter looked up with the serious expression she wore when processing important information. "Mama," she said carefully, "the new baby will need me to help, right?" "Absolutely," Kenya assured her. "Big sisters are very important helpers. Like how you helped Daddy and me on the airplane?" Kenya felt her heart catch at the reference to their origin story, which had become part of Lily's bedtime repertoire. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Sometimes people need help and we get to be the ones who provide it." "I'm good at helping," Lily declared with satisfaction. "Yes, you are," Dalton agreed, kissing his daughter's forehead. "You're the best helper in the world." As they prepared for bed that night, Kenya and Dalton reflected on the perfect symmetry of their story. It had begun with a child who needed care and an adult who was willing to provide it. Now they were preparing to welcome another child into their family, surrounded by a community that had grown from a single act of kindness on an airplane. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten up that night?" Kenya asked as they settled into bed. "Never," Dalton replied without hesitation. "We were meant to find each other. Maybe not on that specific flight, but somehow, somewhere. Love that's strong doesn't miss its target." As Kenya drifted off to sleep, she could hear the faint sound of Lily talking to herself in the next room, practicing all the things she would teach the new baby. The sound filled her with contentment and anticipation for the continued unfolding of their beautiful, unexpected life. Their story had begun with tears at 30,000 feet and had grown into a love that soared higher than any airplane could fly. And this was only the beginning of the lifetime they would spend building dreams together, one act of kindness at a time. Outside their window, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, full of possibilities for tomorrow's adventures in love, family, and service to others. In the nursery down the hall, the crib that had once been Lily's waited patiently for its next occupant, ready to welcome another child into their circle of love. The future stretched ahead, bright with promise and grounded in the unshakable foundation of a love that had transformed two strangers into a family and touched the lives of hundreds of others along the way. From a crying baby on an airplane to a thriving family and community resource, their story had become a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of believing in others, and the magic that happens when hearts align in service to something greater than themselves.